Real African stories, real African experiences. This is Legally Clueless After Hours. And in this episode, we'll catch up with Roseline to find out what came after a dowry return ceremony and 2 marriages. You know, when we record the stories, it's normally just me and the storyteller alone in a room. The world is not there. Now it's like eyes. So it's very different. So quick, just run down. I want to share where I think I said it on the podcast episode that you were in, but I'm just going to repeat it. I met Roseline at another storytelling event, and we went through the rehearsals and everything. And at a point, she came up to me and she was like, "Was your mom Mary Onyango?" I'm like, "Yes." She's like, "That was my friend. I remember once you came to pick some medicine she forgot at my house." And I just thought that was so wonderful. And for us to then connect and hear her wonderful story, Roseline, I think you're doing such an amazing job, and you're such a fantastic African woman.
Thank you. Thank you.
How are you feeling today, first and foremost?
I'm nervous. I never told that story on a live audience that I can see.
Yes.
Yeah. We normally don't see the audience when we tell stories elsewhere.
Next time we'll have like a yellow curtain and it's like audio our voices. But let's dive right into the conversation, because I loved, there's a part in her story where you said, when we're talking about marriage, actually, my first marriage, and it was so refreshing to hear an African woman say that, because I kind of believe that there's stigma around how many times you get married, but then you'll see a lot of like Western women say like, my 4th marriage, and it's like a normal thing, right? And so before your first marriage, what were your views on marriage?
Wow. I grew up in Western Kenya, in Siaya County, in Bondo. I'm as rural as they come. I'm actually a village girl. So any perspective on marriage I had very minimal knowledge on what marriage is, or even what it should be. I watched my parents, who were both teachers, have a marriage of friendship, trust, and partnership. And so growing up, and of course, more or less, because we were 6 daughters and 1 son, so my mother raised daughters in a system where daughters were really not as valued as men. I think sons beget more honor in marriages. So watching that, I sort of had an idea that girls will have to get married someday, but my parents were focused on us getting education, going to college, and getting careers. So marriage was not a discussion. There was no guidance. There was no mentorship. Marriage was not a conversation to have, especially in the household that I grew up in. But it was expected that you would get married. So I had no knowledge. So getting into my first marriage, that bad decision girls make, I looking back in hindsight, I want to believe that was a very quick, bad decision. And I also believe that girls in the rural setting lack such spaces for such conversations. What is your career? What does marriage mean? What should it be? What should it not be? And I think I sound still today when I say I've been married twice. Maybe I intend to marry again because I love love.
Yeah.
And so every time I say in my first marriage, it is like I'm the odd one out, accepting that marriage can happen as many times as it should. A woman wants to, or a man wants to. I've actually told Adele in some other spaces that I don't think a woman should end with one love all her life. Does not make me famous. But I also think people change. And when they change, whatever appealed to them at a certain period of their lives does not appeal again. And women should be allowed to transition into their new spaces. And that means sometimes stepping out or walking out in what doesn't serve you. Yeah. So I had no clue what marriage was when I made that decision.
Yeah, I remember, I think you told me that we were in Seattle together, and I remember she said, like, I don't believe a woman should have one partner. And you've
for the rest of her life.
For the rest of her life. And you told me that twice. I think Seattle was the second time. The first time he told me, I was in the headspace of like, I don't like these guys, you know? So I was like, that's true. And you told me in Seattle, I was now like all mushy and in love. I was like, no, you know? But I see where you come from. Women should have the agency to like change your mind and leave when you want to. Another interesting thing in your story that really stuck to me, and maybe you can expound on it, is once you get married, it's assumed that then you go and live together, isn't it? That's like what people assume happens. But your first marriage, you got married and then you didn't go live with your husband, which should have been like your insiders telling you, I don't think we should do this. What was the dynamic then? Why do you think that happened?
Adele, I'm such a believer of intuition. I'm such a believer. I really follow my intuition because I think it's the spirit telling you. And if you are a believer, faith-based person like me, your insight, your intuition is always warning you against or for something. So when dowry was paid, I didn't move immediately with my husband, my ex. And my sister kept on asking me, when are you going? And I was wondering, am I supposed to go? And my sister said, when dowry is paid, girls, and because sisi ni wale wa kwa mapera, no wedding, no nothing. And my friend says that I think a wedding is where you call people to see you shower naked. So the bad vibe that comes with the wedding and dinner, that's another story also, Adele. Perhaps we should tell that one in another podcast.
Yeah.
But I was contemplating after the dowry had been paid, if my decision was right and if I fully understood, or even if I was I think 27, 26, thereabout, if I fully understood what it meant to live with a man full time. Because I was raised by my parents as a last-born child, 7 of 7, a 7-year difference between my sister and I. I was my father's daughter, later became my mother's daughter. So for that, I contemplated for almost 3 weeks if I fully understood what it meant to live with a man. And by the time I was going, I think the first month, I knew I was going to live.
Wow.
I knew I was going to live. But it took me 3 years to live. Because also women must prepare themselves. The choice to go in and the cost of living is something I did not prepare for.
And like when you go in, there's another stereotype. When we look at marriage, it's a very like one size fits all definition that we have, right? You get married and immediately what starts happening is that pressure of, okay, so where are the kids? You know what I mean? And everybody's like, where are the kids? Where are the kids? How did that start sipping into your marriage and then lead to like the discomfort you spoke about in your story?
In that story, I remember sharing with you that the burden of expectation on young married women. One burden of expectation, when are you going to get pregnant? They don't ask that to the men, do they? They don't. And so when you don't have a baby bump, the 1 year, friends and family, relatives start to question, is the baby going to come? Why are you still slender? Why? And I'm pretty tall. Yeah. So I was much slimmer then. So you can imagine the expectation. And that puts the burden on the woman. You keep on now struggling to find a child. And a child didn't come because by then I hadn't even discovered that I suffered from endometriosis, a disease that causes women infertility. I had no clue. And so that burden is all left on the woman to bear. And so you carry that burden, you begin to grieve it, you begin to have solitude and depression. And it's another layer of life that you go about life carrying, because women we are innately born, biblically, so to speak, go forth and multiply. So what happens if you don't go forth and multiply? What happens if it doesn't come? And for some women, and I am a woman living in infertility, I'm a childless widowed mother of 27 orphaned children that I love dearly and care for. But also we have to unmother the woman. At the time, I did not even know that you could mother differently. That you could adopt, that you could foster, that you could care. I had no clue there was such space. And now even the Children's Act has changed. So there's more space and room. IVF cost, I had no clue, Adele. there was the cost of IVF at that time, I think was like about 800,000 per session. And it's a miss or hit. The amount of surgery. So there was a lot of burden. Do you go for care or do you go to which doctor? Where do you go? Where do women go when they suffer infertility in this country? So the burden that is placed on women to find children is something to also, a stigma to be spoken about. And spoken about with dignity, not with shame.
Yeah. And I just want to like kind of bring you guys in, just like by show of hand, onto the next thing. I have very strong thoughts about it, but I'll keep them to myself today. How many of you believe that there is value and a role in dowry in marriage? Like, just hands up if you think there's a role dowry plays and we should still have dowry being paid. Okay, so how many don't think that there's a role for dowry? I can see like all the men are just like, that's a trick question. I promise there's no judgment. Do you think that dowry is relevant? Hands up if you think it's relevant. Okay, hands up if you think dowry is irrelevant and we should do away with it. You have been consistent. It's like, get rid of it. And so I think the first time I ever heard of a dowry return ceremony was when we talked, and I was just like, what are you talking about? I already have strong feelings against it being received in the first place, and then now you want to give it back, you know? So first, you can tell us what your thoughts are on dowry and what in the world is a dowry return ceremony? Like, what is that?
Now, this is where I become controversial. Forgive me. I'm childless, so I'm allowed to be controversial. Now that I look back, and I've been working for the last 14 years with women of different categories, different ages, different colors, different shapes, and, you know, all over the world, literally. But I work mostly with widows now in the country. I think dowry is also a space to be interrogated. Especially, not all women are equal, not all women are similar, not all women are the same. If you ask me as a childless widowed woman, I think dowry is about renting women's womb. If I had children, would they have come for dowry refund? In my culture, no. The children that I would have sired would have secured my dignity and protected my parents from humiliation. Because a dowry refund ceremony is a humiliating experience for your parents. And it's also traumatizing to you. But I am allowed to be that because I carry two burdens. And later I remarried and became a widow. I've been childless. I've been brutally divorced. And I have experienced dowry refund, what it is and what it did to me and what it did to my widowed mother. So I'm allowed to explain it as I understand it. Does not mean that it is the same for you. It may mean an appreciation for you as a daughter, an honor. It means many things. But the cost of what it means for the woman that you are, I think women need to be educated for it, which I was not. I should have been told, if you don't have children, this cow, 2 goats and 2 cows that were paid as my dowry price would become the trauma of my life, and they would have to be paid back. I was not told that. And now that I know it, I also think we owe it a duty of care to tell it to the next generation of women. And that is why I tell my story.
And so, like, the 2 goats and the 2 cows, do they just, like, walk back into the boma? Because, like, even the person returning it, don't you feel some type of way? Like, do they walk back and then they just, like, take them back out and you just watch them go?
No, I
with
don't.
The 2? Or do you pay? And then also, like, okay, if you've already slaughtered them, I really thought about this. I really thought about it. If you've already slaughtered them, right? Hear me out. You already slaughtered them. It's 3 years in or so. So the cost of the cow back then and now is different.
Yeah.
So if I'm paying back, so I was just like, What? Oh, and who sets the rules? So like, did they come back on the day and like, was your ex-husband there?
No, he was not there. So he sent a party, a group of 3 men. And I when I tell the story, it's more hilarious than that. Of course, we make it a little funny. It wasn't funny then. And in my story, and which you've heard before, I stood at the door, these yellow doors, smeller like that. My father painted, perhaps to make our lives happier on bad days. Yeah. And I stood there. My mother had made it clear in my hearing that my uncle, who wanted to lead that ceremony. And my mother said to my Uncle John, I said, it is my duty to set my last-born daughter free because I'd gone through a brutal divorce. My business was burned to ashes. My apartment, newly rented apartment, was burned down. I had a business at the Arambe Circle on the 6th floor. I lost a government job. The person who was introduced as the MC was talking about my government job. I lost my government job that I'd held for almost a decade. I lost a scholarship at a local university in my 2nd year. So divorce was expensive and brutal. And so returning dowry partly was my mother's call, but how it came was something I was not prepared for. Maybe my mother was. Now she's deceased. So it shocked me. In fact, I stood at the door and asked, who really takes back dowry? They all had me and no one responded. And you know, such ceremonies attract villagers. You know, the word goes round. And so women were walking in on this particular day. A group of these 3 men, they didn't even shake, they didn't enter the living room, they didn't come in, they were just even there were always some chairs, plastic chairs at our veranda, they never sat. And my mother walked in her gate in fullness, and you know, and they greeted her, she didn't respond. She pointed out to my male cousins, 2 of them who were watching those 2 goats and cows and, you know, released them to the gate. And quickly, the elderly man of the party shook my uncle's hand and said, it's over. I said, who really does that? Is that it? Yeah. Is that the ceremony? So then they walked fast towards the gate as if running to an important meeting. And I tell you what, you left there as a daughter, as a woman, wondering, all this is just about cows and goats or about me? You know, who is this really about? Whose dignity is actually being reduced to nothing here? And you know, I think it's because such conversations, Adele, are so taboo that nobody wants to even think that this, when, you know, in the law is Nyombo, in Rurashio, nobody is able to even think beyond that day. You know, so my storytelling is just asking women to think beyond that day. Later remarried, got widowed, think beyond death do us part. What happens to you after all this is done? You know, and my mother had warned me not to marry him. Hey, ladies, can you really advise women in love? You can't. I was just one of them. And so you can imagine how I bowed in shame when my mother began to pray. Literally, I bowed in shame. So I am sharing my story so that other girls can see themselves and do better, because the best way to learn is through other people's stories.
Yeah, that's powerful. And it also makes you just even understand how uncomfortable and unfair it is that even the refund of the dowry is being done by the men on your behalf. It's just like, okay, so is it about, as you said, is it about the cattle or is it about me? After all of this, and I think we've all been through breakups before. We do have Kleenex in case I've triggered someone to like think about something not so nice. It's always hard to like love again. Afterwards, because you're just like, you go through the healing, but there's a point where you're just like, I will never let myself get to that level where somebody else is that close that they can hurt me. But then you met who I thought from your story was one of the loves of your life. I don't know if I'm right, but when you talk about
you're right.
Up to there, right? When you talk about him, your eyes would light up, and you just had such beautiful memories about him. How did you meet your second husband?
Wow. My DNA is love, guys. Don't judge. Don't judge. And I think my second marriage came because someone I'd met before. He was not new. Actually, I think I ought to have married him the first time. But you sometimes go wrong. And I've accepted, and I live from saying I'm sorry. I'm sorry I was wrong. And I'm really... because I am made for love. I really love deeply and I love wholly. And that's why I'm able to even support children. I'm a childless mother. I support many people who are not my relatives nor my friends. So I think the way my soul is pure love. And that means it's also very vulnerable. And so when we met again after my divorce, and something he said, his name Oscar, now 14 years dead. And he said, I honor everything you've been through. And I commit not to hurt you. And so that is what appealed to me.
I'll take notes.
Yeah. And even when, sometimes you are loudmouth. Even when you are loved right, you can still think you are loved wrong. And would say, no, I still honor everything you've been through. And the way we will do this, it's a partnership, it is friendship, it is trust. And you will do everything you want to do because I shouldn't take away your dreams. I should add. And I was flying, going to China, doing this, doing business, thriving literally. And so he taught me what I learned. He taught me what marriage was and what it was not supposed to be. It was not supposed to lessen me. In fact, it was a safe space for me to even heal from my past wounds. And even when I was trauma triggered because I had not seen better, I had no clue what better was. I didn't even know women were supposed to be loved that way. So he taught me how women were supposed to be ambitious and loved right. Actually, he also introduced me to public life because he was a politician and was always, riding with the big boys in town, the who is who. And so he was doing it in a way, and he knew I was suffering from endometriosis. My mother made it clear that you have to tell them you are having an infertility issue on day one. Can you imagine you arriving at your mother-in-law's and your mother saying, have you told her? Have you told her? And if they don't reject you on day one, you can handle it. And my mother was that mother. You can handle it in the immediate. If they reject you later, it will be too painful to bear. And so every time, even aunties and relatives from my late husband's side started bringing the childlessness issue, he would tell them, you knew this all along. And I made my choice. And I promised her, I committed to her and her people and her mother that I would honor everything she has been through. If a child comes well and good, and in fact, he's the one who introduced me how to mother differently. Said, you can unmother yourself. You stop yourself from the bondage of seeking children in ways that are, in fact, he called it traditional. And then I knew he was the one. Because it is not every day a man would show up, an African man would show up and accept you if he knew you would not give him children. It's not every day. And that is why I carry fond memories. And we were great business partners. We were thriving. We were doing great things. And death came. And also that's why I tell my story, because death will set you apart. And when it does, everything shifts. And then you have to deal with the new grief and find yourself again.
How do you, I think that's one fear I have about grief. Like, I feel like, and I've said it on the podcast, I don't think I have enough gas in my tank to grieve someone else. So I'm just like, nobody's allowed to die. It's me first. Y'all can handle it. I don't want to. But when I think about like a partner and someone you love and someone like you're doing life with, I don't even like thinking about like, how do you grieve that, right? Like, so what did grief look like for you when you lost this Oscar, who's like the love of your life?
And he's your relative.
So I hear.
And that's now how
the men from my area.
And that's how Adele's mom was connected to me. He's the one who introduced me to Mary, and Mary was like my cheerleader, my supporter, and sometimes my bad girl group. Grief is a dark, long, deep pitless latrine. It eats the core of your soul, and it is endless. You don't grieve yesterday, you don't grieve tomorrow, you grieve for the rest of your life. Because there's something that death does. Death brings shame, death brings stigma, death brings fear and silence. You become mute. Death mutes you. And it's been 14 years, and I've healed a bit. But when I'm happy, I still cry. When I am sad, I still cry. And I have so many trauma triggers that as much as I know I try to date again. It's not easy, ladies. Hey, I am older. It's not easy. But I still go in the spaces of, because one of the things as a widow now that I have come to really find difficult is also the concept of how do you date as a widowed woman?
Yeah.
And you don't silence all the voices of stigma that are, external. Are you the one moving with the so-and-so's widow? They whisper to the ones here, and then the ones here, now in Luo, there's wife inheritance, widow sexual cleansing. So the man is stigmatized already, and he runs off. So grief has taught me maybe some lessons. It has taught me that there will be bad days and good days. It has taught me to refine myself anew. And I've also learned to redefine and create my boundaries. Of note is I have come to understand death so intimately that I know I live my life from the point as if I'm dying tomorrow. I live in the full knowledge that life, a lot of us are really trying to build permanency around here, permanent house, permanent job, permanent. Nothing is permanent really, Adele. Everything here shifts in a second. You live here, you die. You live, you die. And it can happen in a flip of a second, and your life will never be the same. So maybe if I say nothing of not important today, don't go to bed angry. Please try to settle your scores. You don't know whether you'll see that person the next day. And the moment you are gone, you have so much regrets. You have so much. In fact, to carry yourself from your bed to your bathroom will take the grace of God, literally. So I've grieved deeply because I loved deeply. And I honor everything that He offered me, but I also honor myself for everything that I've become. If He hadn't died, I wouldn't have been able to travel the world. I wouldn't have spoken at the UN General Assembly. I wouldn't have been able to draft a widow's protection law. I wouldn't have gone to the UN General Assembly to pass a widowhood resolution. I wouldn't have been able to build an hospital and a school right now in my community. And I wouldn't have been able to build a widow's movement in this country. If He hadn't died, I wouldn't have. But because He died, I became something else better and more refined. Death broke me open.
So wonderful. Oh my goodness. So there's two things that I want to do before we open it up to the Q&A. So if you have any questions and some of the things that came up in the story and on the podcast and even now, just get ready. Dating after being loved right. Now your standards are like upper Jew. And then there's also the stigma that comes with being a widow. There's the issue around infertility. Tell me about some of the notable dates you've been on. Some that went right, some that just went.
You're my girlfriend. You shouldn't say me like that. Oh my God. And, we gossip when we travel together. I've been in lately I've been going on dates. Lately.
All right.
It's so difficult. It's good for me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so difficult.
Yeah.
Now, one date. So this guy said hi for 30 days. Hi. Man, who does that? Say something concrete. Give me content. I am a sapiosexual. My brain works better. I love I love knowledge. I love intellectual arguments. I love spiritual arguments. And I have deal breakers. I've told you this before.
Yeah.
I have serious deal breakers. I am not church going, but I'm highly spiritual and intuitive. So we can't argue about faith. So that's a deal breaker. So I've gone on a date. I went to, it was winter in London.
Hey, dates in London.
Siringi, sijaringa. And we were storytellers. And then it was cold. So then I went on my girlfriend, because I studied, I was in London 2018 for a course, master's class on project management at the London School of Economics. So my girlfriend, who was hosting me after the whole storytelling, set me on a date. And then the guy was an atheist. So that was already a deal breaker. Another one locally said, hi, 30 days. See, that's a deal
breaker.
Where are we going? Then another one said, I have 2 wives. I want to make you my 3rd.
Oh.
That's a deal
breaker.
So I'm still out there looking, searching. And now this is where I become controversial, Adele. If my mother was alive today, and because I am really a product of my mother, highly intellectual, highly grounded, whole in her authentic self. Today, if my mother was alive, I would ask her, tell your church women to matchmake me. I would tell her. I am a believer in matchmaking because I believe there are people in your space who know you too well. When they find the right person, they would matchmake you. I am a believer in that lately. Because I think some of the mistakes women make, and I'm controversial, I accepted already. Some of the mistakes women make is because we don't do enough due diligence. And that becomes like your safeguard. But I'm also open to meeting and crashing. But please contemplate. Ask questions, difficult questions. When I train widows, maybe this is the last thing I say on this one. When I train widows, I have a session of where you do a session of dating as a widow. And I ask, I have 10 questions on it and say, where did you come from? What do you want out of this? Do you want children? Do you want a job? Do you want my cattle? Do you want my land? What do you want out of this? And what triggers you when you're happy? What triggers you when you're annoyed? So that you have and we make it a fun session. And so that women can begin to also interrogate partners on their own terms, not only partners having control on how they want you to appear. Don't wear that dress, don't wear that lipstick, so that, and you don't ask in my voice. You know, my voice is not very good. You could become a little girly when you ask these questions, and they'll reveal, over time, they'll reveal. And so I am a trickler for really asking your partner difficult questions, because I've made mistakes before. And I honor and respect my mistakes because they brought me to the place where now I know what dating is, marriage is, an encounter, one night stand is. And now I understand that love starts, but love doesn't complete. I also am a believer that women are complete with children or without children, with husbands or without. Who amongst us here was born knowing that she'll get married and have children? Women are simply complete. Women should not be burdened by life and social status and demands of society. Adele.
And your next date should be in London. Not just Java here. No.
I hear you.
And so... I also want to understand you've already spoken on why a woman shouldn't have just one partner across her life, and I love that. Maybe in wrapping, before we go into the Q&A, we can touch on the work that you're doing now with widows, because I think it's very powerful to be able to take an experience that you've gone through and build it into something that's in service of others. So tell us about Rona and the work that you're doing with widows.
Now this is where you introduce yourself. I should have started. My name is Roseline. I am the Executive Director of Rona Foundation, a widow human rights organization that works with widows in 20 counties, but we basically are domiciled in Siaya County, where we run a network of more than 10,000 widows clustered in groups. And we offer scholarship right now to, I think our finance officer is here, Steven Doska, my team are here. And we support scholarship, I think 150 children, and we are big in Siaya County. We have a school, we are building a level 3 hostel now, so we are really big on grassroots development and bringing services to rural women. Why am I a storyteller? Because sometimes when you say you are an ED of an organization or a director, that supersedes who you really are. I believe people are their stories. If my husband hadn't died, I wouldn't be running a foundation that supports widows. If I hadn't experienced infertility and seen physically, gone through a dowry refund ceremony, I wouldn't be able to craft a story to tell the world and break reproductive health rights, access to reproductive health services. Because when you tell stories, and your personal stories here, you are either speaking to an issue or changing an issue. And sometimes it's just one person in the room. And we've shared this with you. It's not that storytellers are great, but for me, normally I trust who is listening because I remove the burden of knowledge from me and I return it to you. It is up to you to do with what I shared here today. It is really up to you to use it or not to use it, to think it's small, to stigmatize me. The power is in your hands. You can do with me anything you want. But because I escaped something that ought to, and has killed even some women. Some women have died because of shame. Some women have been killed because of stigma. I have seen lately people committing suicide, things that even me I contemplated taking my life out. You know, so I tell stories as a tool to drive change and transform lives, but also as a tool to show the world that it can be done. We are the evidence of change, of things that Africa still consider a taboo. We are saying this place and no more. Women should be themselves and they are complete.
Yeah, and I think I just need to give you a warm round of applause. The work she does at Rona is just so powerful and so necessary. And I feel like if you weren't as loud as you are, even we wouldn't have known how best to support widows in all our communities. You know what I mean? Yeah. So Caleb has a mic. If you have any questions, we're going to open the Q&A around.
And Adele, maybe one more thing. Yeah. We are working in Siaya County to outlaw harmful widowed traditional practices. And we hope that other counties will outlaw it so that women can come out of bondage of cultural customs, just the same way they outlawed FGM. Yeah. Except widowed cultural practices are by tribe. So it is almost impossible to pass a national law. Maybe if the government sets up a widows commission, we will figure out how to do that. Widows also need to be represented in appointive and elective positions. In Siaya County, 3 out of 4 women elected as members of county assembly are our widows. We lobbied for them, we campaigned for them, we supported them. It's not about women anymore. It is which women. Which women are we discussing here? Which women are missing? Which women are missing? And what is their need? And do we understand their needs intimately? In a way that then, because nothing for us without us is real. If young women are missing, then there's nothing for them. If women in IT are missing, there's nothing for them. If women scientists are missing, there's nothing for them. It's the same thing. Today, I see a number of young women here. Tomorrow, these young women will be widows because research says that at 59, in 1,000 women, 50% will have experienced loss of a husband. So we are securing your future so that you don't find it how we found it. Even if they don't pass the law, you will have a draft bill to work with in the future when we are gone.
Oh, thank you so much for the work that you do. So if there are any questions, Oh, there's one right at the back.
This is the part I fear.
Oh, no.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
Should I stand? I'm tall. Hi.
Hi.
First of all, I love seeing happy women. And you're such a happy woman. All of us, we are here. Hi, guys. I just love it. I just love being here because of that. When I listened to the podcast, if I'm not wrong, you said in a light note that you'd one day want to sit down with the first husband and just umuulize kwa kweli what was happening. Did you get a chance to do that? If not, is it still in your mind? Or the question is here, did you get closure, or do you think closure is overrated? Thank you.
Oh,
That's
closure.
a good question.
I have gotten closure at a personal level, but I don't think he has. Because people like me are like spirits. We don't die. We shift and transition and show up again. So because we still, families like each other. There may be an in-law here, a brother there, a sister there, a co-wife there who may not like you, but larger family, literally, not everybody disagrees with each other. Family conflicts are afloat though. But why I think closure is also important when you go through trauma like what I went through is that you also want healing for the other person. Maybe for me, I have been in a place and I've seen worse situation. I have seen women barely getting out of bed. I've seen women at the verge of committing suicide. So I'm able to help myself heal. But I also think I owe him a duty of care to tell him, you did me wrong. But like Joseph in the Bible, but God used it well. So I will have that conversation. Maybe I don't have the courage also. Sometimes I wonder, should I make the call or should I let someone? When I do, I'll tell Adele in another podcast. Because I think it is important for women to face their perpetrators, even if they're rapists, and speak to them directly. And I intend to do so.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I have a question. It's religious. Earlier on in your marriage, when you left the first one, how did you reconcile religion and living a marriage? Because faith sometimes favors men. Yeah. So how did you reconcile? Like, I still have faith, yet I'm still living you. Yes.
That's true.
Wow.
Favors men all the time.
You guys are too smart. I ain't that smart. I think religion and culture are sisters. They are spaces of bondage or freedom. And if you want to look around, Kenya is the best case study. Look at Shakahola. And I work in rural communities. I see so many Shakahola versions that are untold, whether in indigenous African churches or mainstream churches. When I left, I didn't live for church. I left for me. I left to safeguard me. Because I knew better that I could do. I knew I had potential. When I was the top of my class, I was a daughter of teachers. I was a shining girl all through. So I didn't live for him. And I didn't even live for my mother. When I stepped into that, we had an apartment in Nairobi West. And the first month I already knew I was going to leave. No religion teaches you makes you ignorant, does it? Does religion make you ignorant? I think religion has been used wrong to lessen women, to reduce them to think, like now let me speak as a widow. They use this stigma statement that God is the husband of widows. And therefore, even when you are starving to death, you have no house, your children have been taken to work as a child labor, you have no food. God is the husband of widows. Is religion still good? Yet the same Bible talks in James 1:27. True and pure religion is helping widows and the orphans in their hour of need and staying undefiled in the world. I thought when I left, I was being defiled. And defilement here is not rape. It could be mental. It could be, because in my first marriage, food was being rationed to me. You can't have children, so you can't have eaten 200 shillings potatoes. I was not supposed to have friends. I was not supposed to go to certain places. Is that not a Shakahola version? I think for me, women, Adele, should define the framework of how they want to live their lives without being too religious and without being too cultural. You have to find what you really are about and authentically and sometimes unapologetically show up for who you are. The world will honor authenticity. This is what I've discovered. The world will honor authenticity. Then your faith will follow. So my faith does not inhibit me. I am if you in this room, maybe I'm most religious. I pray all the time. I read, you know the vibe. I read the Bible. I panic when I go on stage. Because I raise children who are not mine. I pray that God, may they never fall sick. Or something never happens. I am really my mother prayed me to now. So I'm a product of prayer. But prayer is not a tool of abuse. Religion has been used as a tool to abuse, disinherit, and take away the dignity of women and girls. And I stand against it in that regard. I hope I answered, yeah.
Okay, so we'll take the last two questions. Because I know I'm like way behind schedule now.
Hi. So my name is Beth. A 40-year-old that is anti-marriage, anti-child-free, all that. So your story resonates with me. And it's so good. First, I would like to say thank you. Thank you because you've built a community and taken care of women that no one looks at. Mm-hmm. I know that for sure because I've seen it in my family. Like the moment your husband is not there anymore, you become a target of so much. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you've helped women in that community feel loved and seen is amazing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
So as a person who has decided not to have children, oftentimes, a lot of people, when I say I'm child-free, they ask questions like, are you child-free or you can't have children? Mm. You understand? So it's okay. It's like it's okay to, if you can't have children, if you're barren, it's fine. But you've chosen not to have children, we don't know who you are. So at what point did your choice stop? Did people stop asking questions? Or if they did, at what time were you comfortable enough with the fact that you don't have a child? I don't want to say childless. I don't like using that word. You're not childless. You take care of so many children. You have children. They might not have come from you, but you do have children. So at what point did you accept the fact that it's not possible for you biologically to have children, and accept and be in peace when you're telling people, I cannot have children? At what point? After the first marriage, after the second marriage, now, are you still there? I'd love to know.
Yes, I'm still there. But that's a very important question. I'm 47 now. And life passed me by. Remember, I was brutally divorced, lived on the street in my 20s. I was living through trauma and people were telling my story in their versions. I was widowed at 32. In my 30s, I was dealing with widowed stigma and disinheritance and everything that comes with widowhood. I suffered cervical cancer at 35. At 35 to almost 40, and that's where your mother came in to support me. I was now fighting a life-threatening, a death-trap disease. Tell me when I had time to think about children. Tell me when I had time to think about dating. And who would date a woman like that? So life passed by. And then by the time I am becoming whole again, then I'm realizing, it's almost impossible to date. And if it is possible to date, they'll date me for the success that I seem to carry and not for who I am. It's very easy when you are people like outspoken like me to attract the wrong people. It's it's sexy. It's sweet. He'll just atakubebea tu bag. Lakini aleti kitu. Si mwanaume alete kitu. Then, amen. So I don't remember being in a peaceful place to recognize when life went by. But I remember building myself, increasing myself, enlarging myself, and looking at motherhood in new lenses. Motherhood no longer meant to me burying, and I speak about in my story, I'm a mother. Not the kind of mother that my mother was. No, not that kind. I am a mother who will not bury any umbilical cord, nor go into labor pains. I labor differently. I labor to provide love, food, fees, support, and care, just like mothers do to their children. Today, I am a child-free. I borrow that word. I'm a child-free, widowed woman using my personal story to educate fatherless children and give other invisible women their voices. Si munipigie makofi hapo. Lastly, Adele, thank you guys. Lastly, I am a woman of faith, and I also believe in the power of the man above. If it is his will that I will have children even in my 50s, I will. If it is not his will, then let his will be done. It is not in my power, it is not in my control. But I'm no longer going to spend my life pursuing childbirth while I can mother the children of the world. Is how I live my life.
So powerful. So I'll just ask that you go straight to your question. So we have like 2 minutes left.
Thank you very much. My name is Esther. For me, the question is, when do we prepare women, girls, and gender-expansive persons who want to, get into a relationship or get married? When do we prepare them to think about it differently, one? And how do we even change the society perceptions about dowry so that then people can actually really know traditionally what that means for women? Because I think since time immemorial, the connotation that is being brought with the dowry is, I bought you, so you know what, I can do anything I want to do with you. And even when you even hear stories of women who have been violated, most of the times, some of them, their men paid a lot of money, and that is the conversation. So I pay this money, 20 cows, 50 cows, then I have the right to violate you, either emotionally, psychologically. So when do we start that conversation so that then people can see beyond the dowry and start having that paradigm shift on what really dowry means? Thank you.
I'm going to be quoted for very many wrong things. I think women will be free when they want to be free. The choice to be free depends on the woman. And sometimes it's a painful choice. And when you choose, because can you imagine if I'm the last born, there's a 7-year difference between my sister Jane and I. Born on the 7th child. Can you imagine if I stood up to my mother, because my father passed on when I was 22, and told her that you shouldn't accept dowry, and yet have daughters ahead of me, dowry was paid? I would be the red sheep. I would be the odd one out, the square peg on round holes. If you really want your life to count, you have to know your worth. When you go to the supermarket shelf, there is the same item, but different prices. What's your worth? Now, Adele, we joke, me and you sometimes, and we say, if now someone wanted to pay dowry, I'll take them into a room and I'll give them the list, the scholarship fee structure of all the children I support. I said, write me a check to all the schools I support children. I'm still negotiating for myself, but I'm negotiating differently. Do women have the voice and space to negotiate their worth on their own? Until women are able to do that, then dowry will be pegged on their neck. And it will be a cost for women to fight for their lives if it goes wrong. Because it's not always often that it goes wrong. Let's agree on this one. But when it goes wrong, it will be walileta ng'ombe. Because in my time, I don't know whether it is now, dowry was also a source of wealth for your brothers to get wives. So your brothers took off with the cows to go pay for their wives. Na wewe unataka kutoka kwa hiyo nyumba. Utarudishwa huko na mateke. So it's really up to women to find their voice. And men, I'm sorry, today I only spoke to women. But it's because I've seen women demean themselves, grow small, and smaller and disappear in spaces where they could have just stood up. Could you even tell your parents that I want to negotiate my dowry in my terms? Dad, this is what I'm expecting. Uncle, this is what I'm expecting. Is it possible? If you don't have that voice, then prepare yourself for worse when it goes wrong. So this is not about what society will do. I think for me, I take the space because we are this change we want to carry. This is what you will do. This is what I will do. And this is what I will do for myself, irrespective, because there's a third person called society that for me, I carried almost losing 30 years of my life, fearing the third person called society. What will they say? How will they say it? Not how will it make me feel or what will it do to me. It is really in your hands. You are the evidence of change and you're the story you tell yourself and the proof of what change can look like. When you change and it takes time and they see you have changed, they will come along you, but it won't be at the onset. I'm sorry, it's a man's world. It's patriarchal, it's brutal. It's difficult for women in election. It's difficult for women in workspaces. It is difficult for women in the media. But still, women have the numbers. They can do something about things they think are not right in the society. Me, I chose to do it my way. I can only plead with you to do it your way.
Isn't that so wonderful?
Thank you for watching this episode. Make sure you listen to our weekly podcast on all streaming platforms and stay up to date with our workshops and events on legallycluelessafrica.com.